Greetings to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I thank Dr. Pachari and Terry for organizing this conference and for kindly inviting me. The BRICS represent today 3 billion people, 20% of the global economy, but 40% of CO2 emissions around the world. And they have, with their growing economies, also have grown their emissions recently. They need to be at the core of the solution to climate change and to the problem of resource scarcity if we are to address climate change. BRICS will be a part of the solution. And this is something that the BRICS have understood. And when I say BRICS, I say with an S, I include South Africa. It's a group of very diverse countries, but they do share some similarities. Each one of these countries is the leader in its own geographical region. And so taken together, they represent potentially a political force to be reckoned with, especially if countries such as India and China and Russia are able to fix their differences. And between China and India, of course, the question of water is absolutely critical. So climate change is absolutely at the core of this agenda. Let me share with you a few stories, a few specific stories that I have personally experienced. One is the story of Brazil. In Brazil, the question of hunger has been mentioned. It's not a new topic. And the question of equality and social justice. Back in the 1950s, José de Castro mentioned that at night, all of Brazil is awake, one half of the country because it's hungry, and the other half because it's afraid of those who are hungry. So Brazil has been trying to bridge this gap and to lift the poorest of the poor from this abject poverty. And when Lula came to power, what made him really extremely popular and a national hero was a number of his very successful policies. One is Bolsa Familia, and the other one is Fame Zero. And both of these programs are giving this kind of opportunity to poorer people to lift themselves. One is to resolve the problem of hunger, provide education. And the way these programs work is that families that send their children to school receive allowances. And the poor who are able to educate themselves also receive allowances. And hence, this is building up the bottom, allowing for a fairer, more equal society, and resolving some of these problems of social inequality and social unrest that Thomas Friedman talked about, which really are a critical area within the BRICS. Avoiding social unrest, that is one of their critical objectives. So, of the BRIC countries, Brazil is certainly the best in class when it comes to energy efficiency and also to CO2 emissions, whereas it's one of the top economies in the world, ranked more or less equal with Russia and India. In terms of CO2 emissions, it ranks at number 18, 20 on the world rankings. And one of the reasons is because of their electrical sector, which comes almost exclusively from hydropower. And the second is the transportation sector that is that is fueled by biofuels. So Brazil has been extremely successful on that front, but that hasn't stopped them. They wanted to go further. And that's quite good news. They have announced a 40% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2020. And that's quite ambitious. When I was in Brazil for the Rio+20 conference, the head of an organization called FINEP was opening one of our events, and he launched right at the beginning of the conference a new fund for energy efficiency and renewables worth $1 billion. And it's quite impressive because Brazil can afford to do this, and it is taking the right steps in order to make this green revolution happen. Russia is a totally different story. Up until a few years ago, in Russia, in fact, the stories of climate change were seen with a lot of apprehension, and climate change was understood to be some sort of a conspiracy from the West to keep Russia down. When Nicholas Stern released his report on the economics of climate change, that was 2006, Vladimir Putin said that, yes, 2 degrees of temperature rise in Moscow, well, that's maybe not such a bad idea. But things changed in the summer of 2010 with the heat wave in Russia, the worst heat wave in 1,000 years, according to Russian scientists. Temperatures went up to 44 degrees. Now, maybe here in India it's not so bad, but in Russia it's quite dramatic. 55,000 people died, $50 billion of economic growth was wiped out, and hundreds of forest fires were swiping the country. And that was something that was quite unexpected. It hit the grain harvests. Food security became, again, an issue in Russia. And that is one of the perhaps turning points. Now Russia is taking energy efficiency and climate change more seriously. And that's good news. That's very good news. Because Russia has tremendous potential when it comes to greening its economy. Now I say potential. It has forests, it has biomass, it has hydropower, it has geothermal, it has wind, it has everything. But that's potential, and in fact it's doing fairly little. But slowly it's realizing that greening its economy, becoming more efficient, will allow Russia to become more competitive. And so we can expect good things coming from Russia in the coming years when it comes to climate change. And it's driven, of course, by the economics. The economics are simply the business case for reducing energy intensity is so compelling that even Russians are moving in that direction. Unfortunately, the questions of low awareness and low understanding of the questions of energy, the potential of energy efficiency are a great problem in Russia. Now, another country, and that's the #1 CO2 emitter in the world, is China. And China has been relying on economic growth in order to resolve these problems of inequality and lifting the bottom, providing jobs, economic growth, prosperity to as many people as possible, food security. But China has been hitting also the limits of what nature would allow it to produce. And so resource scarcity, pollution, the lack of water. I mean, China is literally running out of water. And the Chinese authorities are extremely aware of this problem. So on this, I passed my time, so I'll conclude later on. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Adam.